everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from June 24th, 2022, and I'm recording this on December 23rd, 2022. So, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to any and all that are celebrating. Hopefully you're staying warm where you are. It's not warm here. And just having a good time with family or however it is you celebrate the holidays. So, as always, I give those dates so you know when this information is actually relevant. And as always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. From that week back in June, we got 17 books to talk about. So let's dig in and see what we can learn this week. First up, we have What If? Miles Morales, number 4. This is basically the what if where Miles is, what if Miles had the power of Thor, so he picked up Mjolnir. And this became quite controversial because it was a very controversial portrayal of Miles. He does and says a lot of very not good stereotypes of African Americans in this book. Being controversial, this book jumped up to $25 out back then because people were trying to grab it. And now it's a $1 to $10 book. 9.8. There's a couple sales, $40 to $50, which is basically the cost plus the shipping. I'm just getting one slabbed. This turned into an absolute trap. It is way down. I don't think they actually recalled this book, so there wasn't really a limited number compared to what was out there to begin with. And I'm not sure why you'd really want to collect something that's not a good portrayal of a character, but whatever. Next, we're going to move into option-related stuff. We have like 5 sort of option TV show-related stuff that's not DC or Marvel this week. First up, we have Hotel, number 1. This kind of horror comic was optioned. Raw copies back then were going for 15 to 20 plus. Now it's a $5 to $15 book with very few sales. This one definitely turned into a bit of a trap. The cat is not happy that I've shut the door. But we're going to keep moving. Next, we have Midnight Western Theater, number 1. This was also optioned. Another Scout comic that was optioned basically as soon as the number 1 was released. This happens a lot with Scout, and almost none of these have ever come to production. Back this one, then Tom put this on the list, even though it really was only going for $6, just slightly over cover price. Now it's a $5 to $10 book, so it didn't become the trap I thought, but definitely just an I'll be back. There was no reason to chase it. 9.8, 2 sales, one for $60, one for $125. I feel like that person who paid the $125 might regret that, but we will see. Next, we have Midnight Western Theater, number 1, the John Gallagher variant that was limited to 300. So we got a variant of this book. Same reason, another Scout book optioned. Back then, raw copies of this limited cover were going for $75 to $90. Now, there's only been one recent sale of this cover, and it was a 9.8 that went for $44. So yeah, that's a dumpster fire. If you're getting a 9.8 for half of what the raw copy was going for back then, not a good sign. So with that, we are going to keep moving. The cat is very angry with me at the moment. Next up, we have Herogasm, number 1. The first appearance of Soldier Boy. Back then, raw copies of this were going for $40 to $60 as we were in season 3 of The Boys. Soldier Boy was appearing as a part of that season. So $40 to $60 for raw copies. 9.8 for $170 to $230. Now, recent sales in the last month or so, we're talking $5 to $30 for a raw copy, 9.8, 70 to 80. You don't have to go back that far. You go back to like October and you're still getting higher sales on this. But November, December, this has not been selling very good. This has turned into a dumpster fire. Because, we've moved away from the season and people are not interested in this book. Very similar to what we get with some of the Marvel shows nowadays. When you move away from the season where the character is, even if they are going to appear again, which I haven't watched season 3 of The Boys, so I don't know what happened to Soldier Boy. I'm guessing probably nothing good. Those books come plummeting back down. Next, we have Cygor, number 1. We talked about this character last week, their first appearance, because there was an announcement about McFarlane working on an animated series for this character that was going to Netflix. It's Todd McFarlane making something into a TV show or movie. I'll believe it when I see it. But yeah, back then, this was only going for $5. This is another one of those, it's like, it was based on the number of sales and not movement of the price. And it's still $1 to $10 book. So it's another kind of steady, I'll be back by default, because it really wasn't going for that much to begin with. It's I'll be back because there's way less sales, so there was no real reason to chase it. There's lots of copies available. With that, we're going to move into covers, and we have just 4 covers this week, so a little less covers than typical. First up, we have Venomized, number 5. This homage to Spider-Man 1, because we've never seen one of those, and it was, we had to have it. I don't exactly even know what the limit was here, but there was basically, this was a $25, $30 book, and then a single sale hit $130. They put it on the list. Since then, it's prompted other sales to be higher in that as you look back through it. But in the last 3 months, because people are asking so much more for this after that one sale, there's only been 2 sales in the last 3 months, a 90 and a 120. So still an I'll be back, hasn't dropped all the way back, but people aren't really willing to pay the higher prices for this very often. So yeah, this is an interesting one. My guess is if people started listing it more where it probably belonged, back in that $40, $50 range even, which would be up from what it was, you might get a few more sales on this one. Next, we have Hulk versus Thor, Banner War Alpha number 1, the second print 1 in 25. So yeah, we got one of these second print 1 in 25s making the list. Back then it was going for 70 plus, which is right around that triple ratio, which I usually say is a fairly good sign. In this case, not so much. I do think somebody made a comment last week about how, in this market, I have to adjust my rules a little bit and yet be even more negative when it comes to some of these incentives and stuff. And that is the case here. This one's now only a $50 book, only one sale. This one definitely turned into a trap. It's not because it's not out there. It's just, people aren't really interested. Next, we have Black Adam number 1, the Louis Perillo 1 in 100 foil. So there is a B cover version of this, but there's also a 1 in 100 foil. The foil is obviously the one hitting the list, and it was $125, $140 for this 1 in 100 back then. Now it's mostly a $70, $80 book, although there was a $200 sale, but that feels like a really strong outlier, as all the other sales are under $100. So yeah, we're going to call this still a trap based on those $70, $80 sales, and not based on that odd $200 sale. Our last cover of the week is Catwoman number 44. Another Sozamaki 1 in 25 hitting the list. Another one with Harley. This one 125 was 75 to 128, which usually I put in as kind of worth it. Usually they stay around this range on a 125. Obviously this year it's not really been the case. It's now a $65 to $85 book. So it's doing decent on the if you got it on the lower end of those prices back then, but definitely an I'll be back. 9.8 only cost you $125 to $150. Another cool Sozamaki. I do feel like her covers when she was doing the 1 in 25s were better than when she got bumped up to the B's. B covers for the most part, but still like her stuff and still looking forward to seeing more from her. With that, we're going to move into MCU related stuff. I was reading the book instead of the category. And yeah, almost the rest of the list, we got one book at the end that's not, but is MCU related. And first up, we have Avengers number 9, the first appearance of Wonder Man. This was that we got official word that the Wonder Man show was in development for Disney Plus. Basically, back then, raw copies were going, Tom listed it as average sales of $1,300. And this is one of those I looked up, and the raw copies were actually going for $100 to $400. I wasn't sure where they were based on that average. This is where they get weird on their average sales for some of these older books. I feel like they're crossing raw and slabs and coming up with a number that doesn't actually mean anything if you're trying to buy the book. 9.2 back then hit 10,000. That's still the last sale of a 9.2 of this first appearance of Wonder Man. 7.0 hit $995 for a sale. Now a most recent 7.0 sale was down to $780. It actually, there was a sale in between that got to like 1100 or something, but then it was back to 9, and then it was back to the 780. So there's been a few 7.0 sales. Raw copies are still sitting in the 1 to 400, which is what I looked up then. Still kind of in that range, but it definitely lower. Most of those sales are on the lower end of that. So I still put this kind of an I'll be back. The book has definitely kind of backed up a little bit across multiple grades, and even the raw sales are on the lower end of what they were before. So kind of a down I'll be back. You could argue maybe this should be a steady I'll be back. But yeah, that's where we're at on the first appearance of Wonder Man. Next, we have Wonder Man #1 from 1986. So this is the one shot, the first solo title, but it was just a one shot and was not an ongoing, like we'll talk about in a minute. Back then, raw copies were going for 10 to 15, a 9.6 at 225. Now it's a $1 to $15 book. No recent slab sales, at least in the 9.6 range or 9.8 range. So another I'll be back. We've gotten more news on Wonder Man. I think we got casting. I feel like this is the guy that we got cast, but I don't actually remember for sure. But yeah, and I said the same thing last week, and I forgot to look and see. But even with the more news about the show, still, and I'll be back here. And then last Wonder Man, well, not our last Wonder Man related, but Wonder Man #1, the first solo ongoing series from 1991. This was on the list last week. And basically, raw copies back then were 5 to 15. 9.8s were going in the $90 range. One jumped up to 165 and then went right back to 90 back then, but they put it on the list. Now it's a 5 to 15. 9.8 will cost you 40 to 100. So I put this as a steady and I'll be back. Maybe I should have done the same for Avengers 9. But anyway, still right in that same kind of range. So yeah. So those are our 3 Wonder Man books. Also Wonder Man related, though, we have Avengers #52, first appearance of Grim Reaper, who is his brother. So this got a big jump, thinking we might see him if we got a Wonder Man show. Back then, raw copies were averaging 205. Now, I did not do a lookup like I did on that Avengers 9 back then to see if that's really what they were doing or if this average was a little off. 9.2s were 485. Now, a raw copy will cost you 15 to 100. 8.5, which is the closest I could get to a 9.2, is 115, 250. So I put this as a trap based on the information I had. This is when I feel like I probably should have done my own research on raw values, because there's... Oh no, this was not a Tom. This was a CBSI. So maybe not. That's probably why I didn't look it up. But yeah, raw sales of 205 seems a little high for this book even back then, but it's definitely down from that if that's really what the case was. Next, we have Marvel Comics Presents #158, first appearance of Clandestine. This had to do with the Miss Marvel show. The version that showed up in the Miss Marvel show was very different than the comic version. But back then, raw copies were going for 40 to 60 on this. Now it's a $5 to $20 book, with most of the sales more on the $10-ish range. This will definitely turn into a dumpster fire. These characters showed up, and they weren't this version, and they were sort of the antagonists. Miss Marvel was kind of weird in the way it had antagonists, but yeah, they were part of what drove the antagonists, but yeah, it didn't amount to much, at least going forward. Next, we have Clandestine #1, the first solo title of Clandestine, plus the first cameo of Adam Destin. And this is another character that showed up and definitely these are part of the characters that showed up in the Clandestine. Again, they were very different versions, but raw copies were 15 to 20 back then. Now it's a 5 to 15. I put this in I'll be back. You could argue maybe it's a trap, but yeah, this just was completely different in the Miss Marvel show than they were in the comics, and there's been no real carryover in value. And then our last book of the week was Spider-Man Blue #1. Last week we talked about The Long Halloween, related to Tim Sale's passing. This is also related to this. Kind of his most famous probably Marvel work, I feel like, were these Spider-Man Blues. I think he was on a couple of the other color ones they did. But back then, raw copies of #1 were going for 15. Still a $5 to $15 book, but definitely an I'll be back. Tim Sale's art wasn't necessarily for everyone, but I didn't always love it, but I did love it on certain stories, and sad that we lost him when we did. So that is this week's list. Again, down, 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 with a few steadies mixed in. Been the story of 2022. We'll see if as we move into 2023, I guess we got one more week of this in 2022, but if we move into 2023, maybe we'll start getting, the market will start rebounding. We will see. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.